The story of D-Day, June 6, 1944, is etched into history as the definitive moment of Allied courage, strategic brilliance, and industrial might. It conjures images of landing craft storming Normandy's beaches, naval guns pounding fortifications, and vast formations of aircraft dominating the skies. But before the first ray of dawn touched the shores, hours before any boots hit the sand, another, far more clandestine and terrifying phase of the invasion unfolded under the cloak of absolute darkness. This was the airborne assault, a massive gamble to drop thousands of paratroopers and glider-borne infantry behind enemy lines, sowing chaos, securing vital objectives, and preventing German counterattacks. The scale of this airborne operation was unprecedented. Thousands of transport aircraft, carrying tens of thousands of men, were set to traverse miles of hostile airspace to designated drop zones and landing areas. The precision required was astronomical. Missing a drop zone by even a few miles could lead to catastrophic dispersal, heavy casualties, and the failure of critical missions. Yet, the conditions were ripe for chaos. Inexperienced pilots flying at night, through potential enemy fire, over unfamiliar territory, and often through unexpected weather. The fate of the entire airborne component, and indeed, a significant portion of the D-Day invasion itself, hung by the slenderest of threads, the ability to accurately deliver these troops to their precise locations. This immense burden, this terrifying challenge of guiding thousands of men in the dark, fell to a select, incredibly brave few. They were the Pathfinders, small, elite teams of highly trained paratroopers, chosen from the cream of the Allied airborne divisions. Their mission was perhaps the most perilous of the entire invasion, a solitary leap into absolute hell, hours ahead of the main force. Their task was deceptively simple, yet monumentally complex. To jump first, into the very heart of enemy territory, locate their designated drop zones, and, under immediate threat of capture or death, set up the electronic and visual beacons that would guide the vast airborne armada that followed. These men were the unseen vanguard, the first into a sleeping, yet hostile, France. They carried no heavy weaponry, no tanks, no artillery, only their personal arms, their courage, and a precious cargo of specialized electronic equipment. They were literally jumping into the unknown, navigating by compass and grit, knowing that the success of thousands of their comrades, and the very timing of the invasion, rested entirely on their ability to perform under unimaginable pressure. German patrols were everywhere, listening, watching, waiting. The Pathfinders were not just finding a drop zone, they were creating one, often in the face of immediate and lethal opposition. For the Axis High Command, particularly Field Marshal Rommel, who correctly anticipated the threat of airborne landings, the night was expected to be a confusing chaos. They knew paratroopers would jump, but they believed such landings would be scattered, disorganized, and easily contained. They never conceived of the precision and coordination that the Pathfinders were there to achieve. This profound underestimation of Allied ingenuity, and the incredible bravery of these specialized teams, would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. The story of the D-Day Pathfinders is one of unparalleled courage, precision, and the quiet heroism that underpins monumental military success. It's the tale of how a handful of men, armed with little more than radio signals and an iron will, literally lit the way for the largest invasion in history, turning chaos into order and laying the vital foundation for the liberation of Europe. Their solitary leaps into the darkness were, in every sense, the first steps towards victory. The decision to launch a massive airborne assault as the spearhead of D-Day was one of the highest-stakes gambles of World War II. For Allied planners, the benefits were clear and strategically vital, but the risks were equally colossal. Conventional wisdom dictated that the seaborne landings needed to be protected, and German counterattacks from inland forces had to be blunted. Airborne troops, dropped behind enemy lines, offered a unique solution to these challenges, but their deployment was fraught with peril. The primary objectives for the airborne divisions were crucial to the overall success of D-Day. Secure vital crossings, capture bridges over rivers and canals, like the Orne River and Caen Canal, to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches and to provide escape routes for Allied forces. Neutralize coastal defenses, attack German artillery batteries and strongpoints from the rear, silencing guns that could decimate the landing craft. Disrupt communications and logistics. Cut telephone lines, seize road junctions, and create roadblocks to impede German movement and prevent rapid counteroffensives. Sow chaos and confusion. The very presence of paratroopers behind their lines was designed to create panic and force German units to fight on multiple fronts, diverting attention from the beaches. However, the nature of airborne operations itself presented immense challenges. Dropping thousands of men and their equipment from aircraft, often at night, was inherently complex and prone to dispersal. Navigation in darkness. Transport aircraft pilots faced the daunting task of navigating accurately over enemy territory in the dark, without radar guidance, which was still nascent for precise troop drops, or reliable visual landmarks. Enemy fire. Flying low and slow over enemy lines meant exposure to concentrated anti-aircraft fire, flak, which could easily shoot down transport planes and scatter paratroopers. Weather conditions. Unpredictable channel weather, fog, low clouds, strong winds, could severely impact visibility and accuracy, turning precision drops into uncontrolled chaos. Heavy equipment. Gliders were used to deliver heavier equipment like jeeps, artillery, and anti-tank guns, but glider landings were notoriously dangerous, requiring specific, clear landing zones. The consequences of poor accuracy were catastrophic. If paratroopers landed miles from their objectives, they would be isolated, vulnerable, and unable to achieve their mission. Dispersal meant loss of leadership, difficulty in forming up, and exposure to immediate German patrols. Gliders, missing their landing zones, could crash into hedgerows, trees, or flooded fields, resulting in heavy casualties for their occupants and the destruction of vital equipment. The entire intricate timetable of the D-Day invasion, with its carefully coordinated air, sea, and land components, hinged on the airborne forces landing with sufficient concentration and accuracy to achieve their initial objectives. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of German Army Group B, was acutely aware of the threat posed by airborne landings. Having studied Allied operations in North Africa and Sicily, he famously stated, "The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. The battle will be won or lost on the beaches." He ordered extensive anti-airborne measures throughout Normandy, including the flooding of fields to drown paratroopers and destroy gliders, and the planting of sharpened stakes, nicknamed Rommelspargel, Rommel's asparagus, in open areas. He was confident that any airborne landings would be met with immediate, overwhelming force and disorganization. The Allied gamble was thus a high-wire act. To make these airborne assaults effective, to transform them from potential suicide missions into decisive strategic tools, something unprecedented was needed. A way to pierce the darkness, to conquer navigational uncertainty, and to bring precision to chaos. This was the imperative that birthed the Pathfinders, a small, elite cadre of men tasked with taking the most terrifying leap of all, hours before the main assault, to guide the thunder from the skies and ensure the success of the high-stakes D-Day gamble. In the face of D-Day's unprecedented airborne gamble, the need for precision was paramount. The solution was as bold as it was terrifying, a specialized force that would precede the main airborne assault, acting as human navigation beacons. These were the Pathfinders, the chosen few, drawn from the elite ranks of the 82nd and 101st U.S. Airborne Divisions, and the British 6th Airborne Division. Their mission was perhaps the most critical and dangerous of the entire invasion, a solitary leap into the hostile unknown, hours before tens of thousands of their comrades would follow. The concept of pathfinding had emerged from earlier, often chaotic, airborne operations in North Africa and Sicily, where widespread dispersal of paratroopers due to navigational errors highlighted a desperate need for better guidance. Lessons learned, often at heavy cost, showed that simply dropping large numbers of men into a general area was insufficient. For D-Day, with its immense scale and precise objectives, a more sophisticated solution was indispensable. Selection for Pathfinder teams was rigorous. Only the most experienced, highly skilled, and mentally resilient paratroopers were chosen. These men were already veterans of dangerous jumps, masters of navigation, and exceptional combat soldiers. Beyond their airborne proficiency, they needed to possess an extraordinary blend of technical aptitude, courage under fire, and the ability to operate independently under extreme stress. They would be alone, deep behind enemy lines, with no immediate support, facing immediate threats the moment their boots touched French soil. Each Pathfinder team was small, typically 18 to 20 men for American teams, and slightly fewer for British. They were meticulously trained for their specific, narrow, and utterly vital role. Their equipment was specialized and precious, designed not for fighting a prolonged battle, but for guidance and communication. Eureka transponding beacons. These were the primary electronic navigation aids. Upon receiving a signal from the Rebecca transponders on the approaching transport aircraft, the Eureka would transmit an answering pulse, allowing the aircraft to pinpoint the drop zone's location and distance. Holophane lights. Large, powerful lamps designed to be laid out in specific patterns on the ground, creating a visual signal for pilots, especially if electronic aids failed or were jammed. Smoke generators, used for visual marking during daylight or twilight conditions. Direction-finding radios, to communicate with incoming aircraft and guide them directly to the drop zone. The training for Pathfinders was intense, focusing on meticulous navigation, rapid deployment of equipment, and immediate security of their drop zones. They practiced night jumps relentlessly, often under simulated combat conditions, learning to orient themselves instantly upon landing, locate their specific positions, and set up their beacons with blinding speed. They rehearsed their roles until every action was automatic, knowing that mere seconds could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure for the main force. Their mission on D-Day was terrifyingly simple. Jump first. Be among the very first Allied troops to jump into France, hours before the main airborne waves. Navigate and locate, despite darkness, fog, and enemy patrols, accurately find their designated, precise drop zones, DZs, or landing zones, LZs. Mark the zones, rapidly set up their Eureka beacons and holophane lights, establishing the electronic and visual guides. Defend the zone, hold a perimeter, however small, to protect the beacons from German patrols until the main force began to arrive. The mental fortitude required for this assignment was immense. They were jumping into complete darkness, knowing that Rommel's defenses, the Rommelspargel and flooded fields, were waiting. They were facing enemy units that were still largely unaware of the invasion, but who would quickly react to the sounds of aircraft and scattered parachutes. There was no cavalry coming to their immediate rescue. The success of thousands of paratroopers who would follow depended entirely on these small, isolated teams. They were truly the chosen few, preparing for a solitary, desperate leap that would illuminate the path for the greatest invasion in history. As the first hours of June 6, 1944, crept towards midnight, the skies over the English Channel buzzed with an ominous, low drone. Hundreds of C-47 Skitran transport aircraft, laden with paratroopers, began their final approach towards the Normandy coast. Among the very first stick of men from these planes were the Pathfinders, the chosen few, ready for their solitary leap into the unknown. Their hearts pounded, not just from adrenaline, but from the chilling knowledge that they were the spearhead, the first to face the fury of a sleeping German army. The conditions for the jump were, in many ways, worse than anticipated. Despite meticulous weather forecasting, thick cloud cover often obscured the moon and stars, plunging the landscape below into absolute darkness. Adding to the peril, many pilots, flying at low altitudes to avoid radar and under intense stress, found themselves buffeted by unexpected headwinds and disoriented by enemy flak, leading to slight deviations from their planned routes. Instead of dropping at the precise 600 feet they practiced, some Pathfinders found themselves dropping from higher altitudes, increasing dispersal. The moment of the jump itself was terrifying. One by one, these elite soldiers hurtled out of the aircraft's doors into the black void below. The cold night air, the sudden rush, and the frantic count before pulling the ripcord were often accompanied by the chilling crackle of small arms fire and the heavy thud of anti-aircraft guns from the ground below. There was no gentle landing. The dark fields of Normandy rushed up to meet them, often concealing hedgerows, ditches, or, as Rommel had planned, flooded areas designed to ensnare or drown any airborne invader. The immediate aftermath of landing was frequently chaotic. Paratroopers, including Pathfinders, often found themselves widely dispersed. Strong winds, navigational errors, and the sheer terror of combat jumps meant that individuals or small groups could land miles from their intended drop zones. The carefully planned rendezvous points were often impossible to reach. Disorientation was a profound enemy. In the absolute darkness, with unfamiliar terrain and the constant threat of enemy patrols, discerning one's precise location was a monumental task. The soft clunk of equipment, the rustle of a parachute being hastily gathered, or a whispered call could betray a position to the unseen enemy. Indeed, the German reaction was often swift. Rommel's forces, while initially surprised by the extent of the landings, were not entirely unprepared for airborne troops. Local patrols, hearing the drone of aircraft or seeing the occasional flare, immediately began sweeping the suspected drop zones. Pathfinders, still struggling to free themselves from their harnesses or locate their scattered equipment containers, faced instant, brutal engagements. These small teams, armed primarily for their technical mission, frequently found themselves in firefights with superior German numbers just minutes after touching down. Their survival depended on lightning-fast reflexes, the cover of darkness, and the training that had instilled in them the ability to fight fiercely and independently. The race against time was desperate. With the main waves of thousands of paratroopers and hundreds of gliders due to arrive within the next few hours, the Pathfinders had to overcome the chaos of their own landings, evade or engage German patrols, locate their precise drop zones, and then, under constant threat, rapidly deploy their critical guidance equipment. The Eureka beacons had to be powered up, the holophane lights carefully laid out in specific patterns, and the direction-finding radios brought online. Every second counted. A beacon not set up, a light not burning, a radio frequency jammed. Any failure could lead to a massive navigational error for the incoming forces, turning the largest airborne assault in history into a scattered, wasted effort. These were the first into hell, and the fate of D-Day rested precariously on their ability to conquer the darkness and the chaos of those terrifying early hours. As the first hours of June 6, 1944, crept towards midnight, the skies over the English Channel buzzed with an ominous low drone. Hundreds of C-47 Skitran transport aircraft, laden with paratroopers, began their final approach towards the Normandy coast. Among the very first stick of men from these planes were the Pathfinders, the chosen few, ready for their solitary leap into the unknown. Their hearts pounded, not just from adrenaline, but from the chilling knowledge that they were the spearhead, the first to face the fury of a sleeping German army. The conditions for the jump were, in many ways, worse than anticipated. Despite meticulous weather forecasting, thick cloud cover often obscured the moon and stars, plunging the landscape below into absolute darkness. Adding to the peril, many pilots, flying at low altitudes to avoid radar and under intense stress, found themselves buffeted by unexpected headwinds and disoriented by enemy flak, leading to slight deviations from their planned routes. Instead of dropping at the precise 600 feet they practiced, some Pathfinders found themselves dropping from higher altitudes, increasing dispersal. The moment of the jump itself was terrifying. One by one, these elite soldiers hurtled out of the aircraft's doors into the black void below. The cold night air, the sudden rush, and the frantic count before pulling the ripcord were often accompanied by the chilling crackle of small arms fire and the heavy thud of anti-aircraft guns from the ground below. There was no gentle landing. The dark fields of Normandy rushed up to meet them, often concealing hedgerows, ditches, or, as Rommel had planned, flooded areas designed to ensnare or drown any airborne invader. The immediate aftermath of landing was frequently chaotic. Paratroopers, including Pathfinders, often found themselves widely dispersed. Strong winds, navigational errors, and the sheer terror of combat jumps meant that individuals or small groups could land miles from their intended drop zones. The carefully planned rendezvous points were often impossible to reach. Disorientation was a profound enemy. In the absolute darkness, with unfamiliar terrain and the constant threat of enemy patrols, discerning one's precise location was a monumental task. The soft clunk of equipment, the rustle of a parachute being hastily gathered, or a whispered call could betray a position to the unseen enemy. Indeed, the German reaction was often swift. Rommel's forces, while initially surprised by the extent of the landings, were not entirely unprepared for airborne troops. Local patrols, hearing the drone of aircraft or seeing the occasional flare, immediately began sweeping the suspected drop zones. Pathfinders, still struggling to free themselves from their harnesses or locate their scattered equipment containers, faced instant, brutal engagements. These small teams, armed primarily for their technical mission, frequently found themselves in firefights with superior German numbers just minutes after touching down. Their survival depended on lightning-fast reflexes, the cover of darkness, and the training that had instilled in them the ability to fight fiercely and independently. The race against time was desperate. With the main waves of thousands of paratroopers and hundreds of gliders due to arrive within the next few hours, the Pathfinders had to overcome the chaos of their own landings, evade or engage German patrols, locate their precise drop zones, and then, under constant threat, rapidly deploy their critical guidance equipment. The Eureka beacons had to be powered up, the holophane lights carefully laid out in specific patterns, and the direction-finding radios brought online. Every second counted. A beacon not set up, a light not burning, a radio frequency jammed. Any failure could lead to a massive navigational error for the incoming forces, turning the largest airborne assault in history into a scattered, wasted effort. These were the first into hell, and the fate of D-Day rested precariously on their ability to conquer the darkness and the chaos of those terrifying early hours. The night of June 5, stretching into the early hours of June 6, 1944, saw the simultaneous deployment of both American and British Pathfinder teams, each facing their own sector's unique challenges but united by a singular, life-or-death mission. Their experiences that night, a blend of meticulous planning and brutal improvisation, would ultimately determine the effectiveness of the D-Day airborne assault. American Pathfinders. Into the Cotentin darkness, the American Pathfinders, primarily from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, were tasked with marking drop zones deep within the Cotentin Peninsula, particularly for their division's objectives of securing causeways off Utah Beach, seizing vital crossroads, and destroying German artillery positions. Their drop was scheduled for approximately 0:15 on June 6. The American experience was characterized by extreme dispersal. Many Pathfinder teams missed their drop zones by significant margins due to a combination of heavy flak, low clouds, strong winds, and nervous pilots taking evasive action. Some landed in flooded fields, others in heavily defended German areas. The chaos of the initial minutes was immense. Men struggled to locate each other, retrieve equipment containers, which often landed miles away, and avoid immediate engagement with alert German patrols. Despite the widespread dispersal, acts of incredible individual heroism and determination allowed some beacons to be set up. For instance, teams from the 101st Airborne, despite landing far from their intended DZs, rapidly improvised. Some, finding their Eureka beacons damaged, resorted to using backup visual signals or improvised radio calls. In one legendary account, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Lilliman's team, tasked with marking the DZ for the 101st near Utah Beach, encountered fierce resistance but managed to set up crucial beacons, albeit late, guiding some of the later waves. The American Pathfinders battled not just the Germans, but also the dark, the confusion, and the vastness of an unfamiliar landscape. Their efforts, though imperfect and costly, were vital in preventing an even greater catastrophe for the follow-on waves. British Pathfinders. Securing the eastern flank, the British Pathfinders, from the 6th Airborne Division, had an equally critical, and arguably even more precise, mission. Their objectives focused on securing the eastern flank of the invasion, including the crucial bridges over the Orne River and Caen Canal, most famously, Pegasus Bridge, and neutralizing the formidable Merville Battery. Their drop was scheduled just minutes after the Americans, around 0:20. The British drops, while still experiencing dispersal, were generally more concentrated than the American ones. This was partly due to more favorable wind conditions in their sector and, in some cases, lower dropping altitudes. However, they faced equally immediate and determined German opposition. Pathfinder teams landing near the Merville Battery found themselves immediately under fire, fighting desperate engagements to secure their beacon sites. One particularly notable success was the Pathfinder team for the drop zone near Pegasus Bridge. Led by Major John Howard, a small group of glider-borne troops, not Pathfinders in the strict parachute sense, but similarly operating ahead to secure a crucial objective, landed with astonishing accuracy just yards from the bridge, a testament to intense training and precise navigation. Meanwhile, the actual parachute Pathfinders, though scattered, managed to set up their Eureka beacons for the main paratroop drops, like Operation Tonga, that would follow. The success of the British in securing their key objectives, including the bridges and holding the Merville Battery area, was heavily reliant on the Pathfinders' ability to establish their guidance systems, allowing the main force to land with sufficient concentration. In both sectors, the Pathfinders' courage under fire was exemplary. They knew they were the first Allied troops the Germans would encounter, and they were often outnumbered. Yet, they fought desperately to protect their precious equipment and complete their mission. Their isolated firefights, their struggles to orient themselves in the darkness, and their relentless determination to get those beacons operational, defined the critical opening moments of the D-Day airborne assault. The chaos of Jump Night was a testament to the brutal realities of airborne warfare, but the eventual success of the main waves in finding their drop zones was a testament to the Pathfinders who, through sheer grit and technical skill, literally lit the way. With the Pathfinders battling on the ground, struggling against darkness and German patrols to establish their beacons, the sky over the English Channel was simultaneously filling with the greatest airborne armada in history. Thousands of aircraft, carrying tens of thousands of paratroopers and pulling hundreds of gliders, were making their way to Normandy. Their successful arrival depended entirely on the courageous, painstaking work of the small teams that had leapt into the darkness hours before. The main assault began around 1 o'clock on June 6, just as the first Pathfinders were beginning to bring their guidance systems online. Wave after wave of C-47 Skitrens, packed with troops, droned across the channel. Each aircraft carried around 15 to 20 paratroopers, their faces grim in the flickering light of the fuselage, their minds focused on the chaos that awaited them below. Behind them, and in separate streams, came the glider tugs, pulling silent wooden gliders laden with heavier equipment, jeeps, anti-tank guns and more infantry. For the pilots of these transport planes, the Pathfinders' beacons were a lifeline. Emerging from the cloud cover or the featureless expanse of the channel, the steady electronic pulse of a Eureka signal on their Rebecca receiver was a welcome, reassuring sign. It meant they were on target, or close enough to make the necessary corrections. In some areas, the faint, coded patterns of the holophane lights, carefully laid out on the ground by Pathfinders under intense pressure, finally pierced the gloom, offering a visual confirmation of the drop zone. The sight of these lights, however small, represented hope and direction in the vast, hostile darkness. However, the navigational challenges remained immense, even with Pathfinder assistance. The sheer volume of aircraft, flying in multiple serials, streams, often meant congestion and further evasive maneuvers. German anti-aircraft fire, though sporadic at first, intensified as the waves continued, creating a deadly gauntlet for the slow-moving transport planes. Despite the Pathfinder's best efforts, many drops still suffered from significant dispersal. American dispersal. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, particularly the 101st, experienced wide scattering. Some paratroopers landed miles from their intended DZs, forcing them to improvise, find small groups, and fight their way to objectives. While challenging, this dispersal also had an unexpected psychological effect on the Germans, who reported paratroopers everywhere, creating widespread confusion about the scale and location of the invasion. British concentration. The British 6th Airborne Division generally achieved more concentrated drops, partly due to less flak in their sector and the relatively shorter distance to their objectives. This allowed them to seize critical bridges and neutralize the Merville Battery with greater effectiveness, securing the eastern flank of the invasion. The immediate impact of the main airborne assault, despite the dispersal, was to sow chaos and confusion behind German lines. Roads were cut, communications disrupted, and small pockets of paratroopers engaged German units, preventing them from forming coherent counterattacks against the beaches. The sheer audacity of tens of thousands of men dropping from the sky shattered German complacency and forced them to divert precious resources inland. The Pathfinder's role in this, though often unsung, was fundamental. Every paratrooper who landed even remotely close to their objective, every glider that touched down with its vital cargo, did so because a small team of Pathfinders had jumped first, into the very mouth of hell, to guide them. Their technical skill, combined with their incredible personal courage, transformed what could have been a catastrophic airborne failure into a strategically vital success. They were the architects of precision in chaos, the silent guardians of the airborne armada, and their efforts ensured that the D-Day gamble, high stakes as it was, had a fighting chance of success. The floodgates had opened, and the liberation of Europe was now truly underway. With the main airborne armada streaming in, guided by the Pathfinder's tireless efforts, the chaos of the night rapidly coalesced into desperate, localized ground combat. The Pathfinders, their guidance mission completed, or still ongoing in fragmented efforts, now joined the fight, transforming from navigators to frontline infantry. Their task, and that of the thousands of paratroopers and glider-borne troops, was to seize and hold the critical objectives identified by Allied planners, the very linchpins of the D-Day invasion. The moment paratroopers landed, the battle for survival and objective began. German units, alerted by the aircraft and scattered landings, reacted swiftly. Machine gun fire raked drop zones, sniper fire targeted paratroopers struggling with their chutes, and patrol units moved aggressively to hunt down and eliminate the invaders. The fighting was often brutal, close quarters, and fought in the bewildering darkness of the Normandy countryside. Dispersed groups of paratroopers, sometimes as few as 2 or 3 men, had to improvise, linking up with whoever they could find, and fighting their way through unfamiliar terrain towards their designated targets. American objectives in the West. In the American sector, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions faced the immense challenge of securing the 4 causeways leading inland from Utah Beach, preventing German reinforcements from reaching the coast, and protecting the beach exit. They also had to seize vital road junctions and bridges further inland. Despite wide dispersal, small groups of highly trained paratroopers achieved incredible feats of improvisation and courage. For instance, elements of the 101st, under Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole, fought ferociously to seize and hold the critical bridge over the Dove River at Corenton, a vital link between Utah and Omaha beaches. Others, like the Band of Brothers of Easy Company, 506th PIR, 101st Airborne, were involved in the crucial assault on the Brecourt Manor Battery, a German artillery position capable of shelling Utah Beach. Their precision attack, despite landing off target, neutralized the guns and is still studied as a model of small unit tactics. British objectives on the eastern flank. The British 6th Airborne Division had arguably the most defined and perhaps most critical opening objectives: to seize the 2 bridges over the Orne River and Kin Canal, famously, Pegasus Bridge and Horsa Bridge, preventing German armored counterattacks from reaching the eastern flank of the invasion beaches. They also had to destroy the formidable Merville Battery, which threatened Sword Beach. These missions were executed with astonishing precision. A daring glider assault, led by Major John Howard, saw glider-borne infantry land mere yards from Pegasus Bridge, capturing it in a swift, decisive action within minutes of landing. Elsewhere, other British airborne forces launched a desperate, costly, but ultimately successful attack to neutralize the Merville Battery. The ability of these units to land with sufficient concentration, largely thanks to the Pathfinders' work, was paramount to these successes. The Pathfinders, having completed their initial guidance mission, were often immediately drawn into these desperate fights. Many found themselves defending their beacon sites against German patrols, ensuring the guiding lights remained operational for later waves. Others, once their equipment was secure, linked up with the main forces, bringing their combat expertise and knowledge of the local terrain to bear on the battle. Their contributions, both in guiding the drops and in the ensuing firefights, were integral to securing the initial beachhead. The immediate ground combat in the hours after the airborne landings was a maelstrom of confusion, individual heroism, and brutal effectiveness. German resistance was fierce, and casualties were heavy on both sides. However, by seizing crucial bridges, neutralizing key gun batteries, and sowing widespread confusion amongst German forces, the Pathfinders and the airborne divisions achieved their primary objectives. They successfully disrupted the German ability to mount a rapid, coordinated counterattack against the vulnerable seaborne landings, creating a crucial buffer and buying precious time for the beach assaults. Their fight, born of the darkness and chaos, was a bloody but vital foundation for the ultimate success of D-Day and the liberation of Europe. As the night of June 5 bled into the dawn of June 6, 1944, the initial German reaction to the D-Day airborne landings was one of profound bewilderment, punctuated by confusion and a series of missed opportunities that would prove strategically vital for the Allies. While Field Marshal Rommel had correctly anticipated the possibility of airborne assaults and meticulously prepared defenses, the scale, location, and surprising effectiveness of these drops largely defied German expectations. Initial reports filtering back to German command centers were contradictory and chaotic. Paratroopers were reported everywhere, often miles from their intended drop zones, yet paradoxically, this wide dispersal created a psychological effect of overwhelming numbers and widespread invasion. Local commanders, hearing about landings in multiple, seemingly unconnected areas, struggled to discern the true concentration or objectives of the Allied forces. This confusion was further exacerbated by disrupted communications. Pathfinders, along with other airborne units, had specific missions to cut telephone lines and disrupt local command and control. This isolation meant that German units often couldn't get clear orders or provide accurate intelligence up the chain of command. Decentralized resistance. German response was initially piecemeal, with local garrisons and patrols engaging scattered paratroopers, but lacking the coordinated, large-scale counterattacks that could have crushed the airborne bridgeheads. The element of surprise. Despite months of anticipation, the exact timing and location of the invasion still achieved strategic surprise, catching many German units off guard, particularly higher command. Hitler himself, notoriously prone to micromanagement and obsessed with the details of the invasion, was a prime example of this bewilderment. He remained convinced, for crucial hours, that the Normandy landings were merely a feint, a diversion for a larger main invasion force that he expected to land in the Pas-de-Calais, directly across from Calais. This conviction, heavily influenced by Allied deception, Operation Fortitude, caused him to hold back vital armored reserves, most notably the powerful 15th Army and major panzer divisions, for far too long. When reports of the Pathfinders' beacons and the sheer scale of the airborne armada began to reach German intelligence, they struggled to reconcile it with their own estimates of Allied capabilities. The idea of small teams jumping ahead to precisely guide thousands of aircraft, complete with electronic markers, was beyond their conventional military understanding. While German scientists and engineers were advanced in certain fields, their military leadership did not possess the same integrated, analytical approach to operational planning that characterized Allied operations research. They understood technology, but not the systematic optimization of its deployment for such a complex, large-scale assault. Rommel, ever the pragmatist, understood the immediate threat, but even his efforts were hampered by Hitler's indecision and the centralized command structure. His attempts to immediately unleash armored divisions for counterattacks were often delayed by Hitler's insistence on personal approval and his lingering belief in the Pas-de-Calais feint. These critical delays allowed the Allied airborne forces, despite their own chaos and casualties, to consolidate their positions, secure objectives, and build a stronger perimeter. The German response to the D-Day airborne assault, therefore, became a catalogue of missed opportunities. Precious hours were lost due to confusion and Hitler's strategic misjudgment. The Pathfinders' audacious mission, by providing a degree of precision and coordination that the Germans simply didn't anticipate, prevented the widespread disorganization that Rommel had planned to exploit. Instead of scattered, easily contained pockets, the airborne troops, even if dispersed, quickly formed effective fighting units, sowing sufficient chaos to protect the vital beach landings. The unseen work of the Pathfinders contributed directly to the bewilderment of the German command, ensuring their response was too little, too late, and, ultimately, allowing the D-Day gamble to succeed. Despite the initial chaos, the widespread dispersal, and the fierce German resistance, the D-Day airborne strategy, fundamentally enabled by the Pathfinders' audacious mission, proved to be an overwhelming and decisive success. The sheer audacity of dropping tens of thousands of men behind enemy lines, guided by a handful of brave navigators, paid off handsomely, directly contributing to the establishment of a secure beachhead and paving the way for the liberation of Europe. The ultimate measure of the Pathfinders' success lay not in their own combat kills, but in the relative accuracy of the main airborne drops. While perfect precision was impossible in the conditions, their beacons and lights, however belated or imperfectly deployed in some areas, provided crucial reference points. They transformed what could have been a catastrophic scatter into a manageable, albeit dispersed, insertion. Without their guidance, the main forces would have been so widely scattered that forming coherent fighting units and seizing objectives would have been impossible, leading to a far greater logistical and tactical nightmare on the beaches. The airborne divisions achieved most of their primary objectives. Secured flanks. The British 6th Airborne Division, thanks to precise Pathfinder guidance and glider landings, secured the vital bridges over the Orne River and Caen Canal on the eastern flank, preventing German armored counterattacks from reaching Sword Beach. The successful neutralization of the Merville Battery, another key British airborne objective, further protected the seaborne landings. Blocked inroads to Utah Beach. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, despite greater dispersal, managed to block and secure key causeways leading inland from Utah Beach. This was critical in preventing German forces from directly assaulting the beachhead, and allowed the U.S. 4th Infantry Division to land with minimal opposition. Sowed confusion. The very act of landing paratroopers across a wide area, even if scattered, profoundly disrupted German command and control. Reports of paratroopers everywhere created widespread panic and forced the Germans to divert significant resources inland, pulling them away from the immediate defense of the beaches. This confusion bought invaluable time for the seaborne invasion to consolidate. Disrupted communications. Airborne units systematically attacked German communication lines, hindering their ability to react quickly and coordinate counterattacks. The dedication of the Pathfinders, who faced immediate danger upon landing, was paramount to these successes. Their desperate struggle to set up beacons, fight off patrols, and guide incoming aircraft under the most terrifying conditions, often individually or in tiny groups, laid the foundation for the precision that was achieved. Every holophane light blinking in the darkness, every Eureka pulse guiding a C-47, represented a tiny victory against chaos, allowing thousands of paratroopers to find their way to their destiny. For the soldiers landing on the beaches at dawn, the sight of the inland objectives secured, or the knowledge that the flanks were protected by their airborne comrades, was a testament to the success of the airborne gamble. The chaos of jump night gave way to the crucial control needed to establish the beachhead. The German High Command, having underestimated the Allied capacity for innovation and the courage of these specialized units, found their meticulously planned coastal defenses outflanked and their counterattack options severely hampered. The D-Day airborne operation, with the Pathfinders as its crucial vanguard, stands as a crowning achievement of military planning and execution. It demonstrated the power of specialized, highly trained units in achieving strategic objectives under extreme conditions. It proved that precision, even in the maelstrom of nocturnal combat, could be achieved through technological innovation and human bravery. The Pathfinders, in their solitary leaps into the darkness, literally opened the gates of Fortress Europe, guiding the flood of the Allied invasion and marking the undeniable beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Their quiet triumph was a thunderous blow for liberation. The story of the D-Day Pathfinders, once shrouded in wartime secrecy and later overshadowed by the immense scale of the broader invasion, stands today as an enduring testament to extraordinary courage, critical innovation, and the pivotal role of specialized units in modern warfare. Their solitary leaps into the darkness of June 6, 1944, were far more than just individual acts of heroism. They were the essential, precise opening moves that enabled the largest airborne assault in history to succeed. The legacy of the Pathfinders is multifaceted. Pioneers of precision airborne operations, they fundamentally demonstrated the necessity and feasibility of highly accurate night airborne insertions. Their experiences, equipment, and tactical methods became the blueprint for subsequent airborne operations throughout the war and influenced post-war airborne doctrine. The lessons learned from D-Day's Pathfinders directly shaped how future special operations forces would be trained to infiltrate and mark targets. The power of specialized skills. The Pathfinders showcased how a small, highly trained, and technologically proficient unit could exert an outsized impact on a vast military operation. Their unique blend of navigational expertise, combat proficiency, and technical skill in deploying beacons was irreplaceable. This underscored the growing importance of niche special forces in modern conflict. Technological integration. Their mission was a prime example of how relatively simple electronic devices, Eureka beacons, holophane lights, could be integrated into complex operational plans to overcome immense environmental challenges, darkness, navigation, and achieve strategic objectives. It was a testament to applied science directly on the battlefield. Unsung heroes. For decades, the specific role of the Pathfinders was largely unheralded, their contributions folded into the broader narrative of the airborne divisions. Their stories represent the countless hidden efforts and individual acts of bravery that collectively ensured Allied victory. Their legacy now rightly claims its place as a critical component of the D-Day success story. The human element of courage. Beyond the technology and tactics, the Pathfinders embody sheer human courage. These were men who voluntarily faced the highest immediate risks, knowing they would be isolated, vulnerable, and likely among the first casualties. Their ability to overcome fear, disorientation, and enemy fire to accomplish a precise technical mission under such extreme pressure is a powerful example of the human spirit in war. For the modern military, the D-Day Pathfinders remain a powerful case study in the intersection of reconnaissance, navigation, and special operations. Their mission underscored that while mass is important, precision, initiated by a bold few, can be utterly decisive. The lessons from their experiences, the need for robust equipment, redundant systems, meticulous training, and above all, adaptable and courageous individuals, continue to resonate in contemporary special forces operations worldwide. Today, if you visit the drop zones and landing areas in Normandy, you can almost hear the faint echoes of those C-47s and gliders, and see the ghostly patterns of the holophane lights guiding them in. The success of the D-Day landings, and the entire Allied advance into Europe, owed an immeasurable debt to these chosen few. The Pathfinders, who leapt into absolute darkness to guide the invasion, literally lit the way for freedom, forever cementing their place as the unseen, yet utterly indispensable vanguard of history's greatest liberation. Their solitary courage transformed the chaos of night into the dawn of victory.